She's covered in grease, fixing a dented van outside Fort Liberty. To the young officer, she's just a mechanic trespassing near a secure zone. He barks orders. She barely looks up. But then he sees it. The ink on her wrist. That insignia doesn't belong to civilians. What he didn't know. She once led Ghost Company, a unit so elite their missions don't exist on paper. Stick around, because when a 4-star general salutes her, the chain of command flips upside down. Justice isn't coming. It just parked outside in a battered van. Don't forget to drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time you found this video. Also, hit that subscribe button. Private First Class. Marcus Winters adjusts his freshly pressed uniform, savoring how the morning sun glints off his badge. 3 months into his first posting at Fort Liberty, and finally a chance to prove himself. The suspicious civilian van near Sector 7 demands his attention. His training kicks in. Assess, approach, assert authority. Johnson, Matthews, form up, he commands his fellow MPs, relishing the crisp sound of boots on pavement. The woman by the van doesn't flinch as they approach. Something's off. Most civilians scramble at the sight of military police, but she stands there, weathered and unimpressed, like she owns the place. Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to move along. Private First Class Marcus Winters keeps his voice stern, hand resting on his belt, just like his training officer taught him. But the woman's calm smile makes his confidence waver. Her eyes hold something dangerous, the kind of steady gaze he's only seen in combat veterans. A subtle movement catches his attention, a flash of black ink on her wrist. Private First Class Marcus Winters' throat tightens. That symbol, impossible. Ghost Company is just a legend, whispered about in barracks after midnight. His hand trembles slightly as he reaches for his radio. Final warning, ma'am. Clear the area or... The words die in his throat as 4 stars appear in his peripheral vision. General Harrison himself, striding toward them with purpose. Private First Class. Marcus Winters snaps to attention, pulse racing. Something bigger is happening here, something way above his pay grade. At ease, Private. The general's voice carries decades of command. Private First Class Marcus Winters watches, stunned, as the mystery woman exchanges a knowing look with the highest-ranking officer on base. His carefully constructed authority crumbles like sand. The morning PT cadence echoes across the parade ground, but Private First Class Marcus Winters barely hears it. His mind races. Who is she? What secrets lie beneath her civilian disguise? His badge, so proudly polished this morning, suddenly feels like a child's toy. Sir, I was just... Private First Class Marcus Winters starts, but the general's raised hand silences him. Some histories don't need clearance levels, son. They write themselves in blood and sacrifice. The general's words hit like physical blows. Private First Class Marcus Winters realizes he's become part of something historic, something that will haunt his dreams. Type ghost if you've ever misjudged someone's true power. Private First Class Marcus Winters stands frozen, watching the woman and general walk away, their conversation too quiet to hear. His reflection catches in his badge, young, inexperienced, desperate to prove himself. But today taught him a harsh lesson about real authority versus assumed power. The morning sun still shines, but Private First Class Marcus Winters' world has shifted. As he orders his team back to patrol, one thought echoes. How many other legends walk among them, wearing civilian skin? Hatchtor Ghost. Company 7 starts trending within hours, and Private First Class Marcus Winters knows his encounter will become part of Fort Liberty's whispered mythology. But the weight in his chest tells him this is just the beginning of a story that will shatter everything he thought he knew about authority, respect, and the true face of power. Officer Marcus Winters gripped his polished brass nameplate, studying his reflection in Fort Liberty's administrative building window. His 20 years of service had taught him the art of maintaining order, and these classified operatives showing up unannounced threatened exactly that. The incident with Claire Redford this morning had already caused whispers among the junior officers, whispers that undermined his authority. Officer Marcus Winters traced the letters of his name on the nameplate, remembering how his mentor, Colonel Harrison, had shaped his understanding of military protocol. Protocol exists to protect the chain of command, Harrison had always said. But something about Redford's dog tags, particularly the classified codes, gnawed at him. In his 2 decades of service, he'd never seen operational markers like those. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office as Officer Marcus Winters accessed the restricted database. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Searching classified ghost company records was beyond his clearance level. The systematic violation of protocol made his chest tighten, but the morning's confrontation had shaken his certainty. Studies on institutional memory and classified operations flashed across his screen, revealing patterns that made his stomach churn. "Sir, there's something you should see," Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked slightly as she entered his office. Officer Marcus Winters watched her set down a stack of redacted files, each bearing the same operational codes he'd seen on Redford's tags. "These go back 15 years. There are gaps in our records." His hand instinctively reached for his nameplate, the brass no longer offering its usual comfort. The weight of it felt different now, heavier with the recognition that his rigid adherence to protocol might have buried crucial history. The young soldiers' faces from this morning haunted him, their confusion mirroring his own growing uncertainty. A notification pinged on his computer. Someone had accessed the Ghost Company archives from multiple terminals. Officer Marcus Winters felt his authority beginning to crack like thin ice. The very system he'd devoted his life to defending suddenly seemed fragile, built on selective memory and convenient oversight. "Have you ever questioned whether our protocols might be wrong?" Lieutenant Chen asked softly, her usual deference wavering. Officer Marcus Winters stared at his reflection again, seeing not the confident administrator of this morning, but a man confronting the possibility that his entire career had been built on partial truths. The afternoon helicopter exercises thundered overhead, and Officer Marcus Winters flinched. Not from the noise, but from the realization that every procedure he'd enforced might have helped bury stories that deserved to be told. His nameplate caught the light, and for a moment he saw it as Redford must have, a symbol of the system that had tried to erase her history. As the day shifted toward evening, Officer Marcus Winters sat alone in his office, surrounded by redacted files and unanswered questions. The proud certainty that had defined his career was crumbling, replaced by a growing understanding that sometimes the most dangerous threat to justice wasn't chaos. It was blind obedience to order. Sergeant Marcus Winters' fingers drummed against his holster as he watched the gathering crowd of junior enlisted personnel around the mysterious van. 20 years of maintaining order at Fort Liberty had taught him to spot trouble, and this woman with her Ghost Company patch was definitely trouble. His pristine nameplate caught the setting sun, a reminder of his authority that had never failed him before. The evening retreat ceremony's bugle call pierced the air, but Sergeant Marcus Winters noticed how the soldiers ignored protocol, staying fixed around the van instead of standing at attention. His carefully constructed world of military discipline was unraveling thread by thread. The woman's presence felt like a splinter under his skin, disrupting the natural order he'd spent decades enforcing. "Clear the area immediately," Sergeant Marcus Winters barked, but his voice lacked its usual commanding edge. Something about those base stickers, chronicling a journey he couldn't fathom, made his chest tight. He'd heard whispers of ghost company, of course. Everyone had. But those were just stories, myths to scare new recruits. Weren't they? The woman's dog tags clinked softly as she turned, and Sergeant Marcus Winters felt his own tags grow heavy against his chest. Her eyes held something he recognized. The weight of classified operations, of missions that couldn't be acknowledged. His hand instinctively reached for his collar brass, his symbol of authority, but it offered no comfort now. "Ma'am, you're in violation of base security protocols," Sergeant Marcus Winters announced, procedure falling from his lips like a shield. But even as he spoke, more boots crunched on gravel, more soldiers drawn to this moment. His carefully maintained barrier between official truth and whispered reality was crumbling. A young private dared to speak. "Sergeant, she's got clearance codes I've never seen before." Sergeant Marcus Winters' world tilted slightly. In 2 decades, he'd memorized every clearance classification. What was this woman carrying that superseded even his knowledge? The viral moment arrived with devastating silence. A specialist's phone captured Sergeant Marcus Winters' uncertainty, his hesitation broadcast live as #Whitley's fear started trending. His authority, once absolute, now questioned by thousands of viewers who sensed a deeper truth behind his rigid facade. "You don't understand what you're protecting," the woman said softly, and Sergeant Marcus Winters felt each word like a bullet. "Or what you're hiding." His carefully constructed narrative of base security began to crack, revealing the hollow spaces where real stories should have lived. The crowd had swelled to 30 now, phones recording every second. Sergeant Marcus Winters watched his reputation dissolve in real time as comments flooded in. "Another officer hiding the truth." His collar brass felt like it was burning his skin. 20 years I've stood guard, keeping order, keeping secrets. But whose order? Whose secrets? Every regulation I've enforced suddenly feels like a wall built to contain truth rather than protect it. When did I become the barrier between soldiers and their own history? Sergeant Marcus Winters' hand shook as he reached for his radio. Protocol demanded he call for backup, but each number he punched felt like another nail in his career's coffin. The woman's ghost company emblem seemed to mock him, representing a truth he'd helped bury under layers of regulations and restrictions. As darkness fell over Fort Liberty, Sergeant Marcus Winters stood frozen between duty and disclosure, watching his world of absolute authority crumble under the weight of buried truths and trending hashtags. The evening retreat ceremony ended, but its echoes lingered like an accusation in the growing dark. Have you witnessed authority crumble? Drop 1 if you've seen power fail in the face of truth. Officer Bradley Davis smooths his pristine uniform, ignoring the growing crowd gathering around Claire Redford's van. His initial satisfaction at ordering her removal has curdled into something darker as the sunset paints Fort Liberty in shades of defiance. The 3 junior soldiers he'd dispatched earlier now sit at her feet like eager students, their earlier loyalty to his authority dissolving with every word she speaks. "This is a violation of protocol," he mutters, fingers drumming against his security badge, the same badge that had felt so powerful just hours ago, The distant boom of artillery practice makes him flinch, each explosion seeming to mock his diminishing control over the situation. Through his binoculars, Officer Bradley Davis watches as more personnel drift toward the van, drawn by Claire's stories of Ghost Company 7. His jaw clenches when he spots Master Sergeant Thompson, a respected NCO, nodding along. "She's compromising operational security," he says into his radio, but the response isn't what he expects. "Stand down, Davis," comes the crisp reply from Colonel Harrison. "Ghost Company veterans have clearance. Full access granted by Central Command." Officer Bradley Davis feels his carefully constructed world tilting. The security badge weighs heavily against his chest now, its polished surface reflecting his own uncertainty. He'd built his reputation on maintaining strict order, on being the unyielding guardian of Fort Liberty's protocols. Now, a woman in a van has unraveled it all with nothing but war stories and dog tags. The crowd swells to nearly 50 personnel, their faces illuminated by the last rays of sunlight. Officer Bradley Davis recognizes faces from every department: ordnance, infantry, even fellow security officers. His authority hemorrhages with every passing minute. "Sir," a young lieutenant approaches, excitement evident in her voice. "You should hear these stories. Ghost Company 7, they're legendary." "Return to your post," Officer Bradley Davis snaps, but his voice lacks its usual command. The lieutenant merely shrugs and joins the gathering, leaving him more isolated than ever. His phone buzzes. Base Command has picked up the hashtag #ArtVeteranStories trending locally. Videos of Claire's stories are already circulating through military channels. Officer Bradley Davis watches his morning confrontation with her replay on screens across the base, his aggressive stance and dismissive tone casting him in an increasingly harsh light. The artillery fire sounds again, and this time it feels like a funeral dirge for his career. Officer Bradley Davis touches his badge one last time before making his decision. With measured steps, he approaches the crowd, not as a barrier, but as a listener. Claire's voice carries clearly. "We stand on the shoulders of giants, of heroes like Sam Reyes, who gave everything for their brothers and sisters in arms." Officer Bradley Davis finds himself sinking onto an empty crate, his badge now hanging loose at his side. The stories wash over him, tales of sacrifice, honor, and a brotherhood that transcends mere protocol. For the first time in 15 years of service, he realizes that true authority comes not from enforcing rules, but from understanding the heart that beats beneath every uniform. Type respect. If you believe every veteran deserves to be heard. As night falls over Fort Liberty, Officer Bradley Davis remains in the crowd, his security rounds forgotten. The van that he'd tried to remove has become a beacon of memory and respect. Tomorrow, he'll have to answer for his earlier actions. But tonight, he simply listens, learning what his badge and protocols never taught him about the real meaning of service. The last artillery round of the day echoes across the base, but Officer Bradley Davis no longer flinches. Instead, he finds himself nodding along with Master Sergeant Thompson, finally understanding that some stories need to be told, some rules need to bend, and some veterans, like Claire Redford, carry clearance written not on papers, but in their hearts and sacrifices. Officer Marcus Winters gazed out the barred window of his holding cell, his once pristine military police uniform now wrinkled and stained. The weight of 20 years of service pressed down on him like the heavy night air of Fort Liberty. His fingers traced the cold metal surface of his confiscated badge, surrendered just hours ago after Claire Redford's revelations had shattered his carefully constructed world of rules and protocols. The crickets chirped outside, an eerily peaceful sound that contrasted with the chaos in Officer Marcus Winters's mind. He could still see Claire standing there in the moonlight, Sam Reyes's dog tags catching the silver glow as she spoke of sacrifice and honor. Concepts he thought he understood until today. The memory of his own arrogant commands to remove her seemed like they belonged to another person, another lifetime. "I never knew," Officer Marcus Winters whispered to the darkness, his voice cracking. "All those classified missions, all those unmarked graves, we were supposed to protect their memory, not erase it." His hand trembled as he placed the badge on the small metal desk, the clinking sound echoing through his cell like a final judgment. The viral video of his confrontation with Claire had reached millions. Ghost Truth trended worldwide, forcing the base command to acknowledge decades of buried history. Officer Marcus Winters watched his phone fill with notifications before they took it away. Comments, shares, voices demanding justice for the forgotten heroes of Ghost Company. His superior, Colonel Harrison, had been arrested an hour ago. The evidence Claire provided exposed years of systematic suppression of Ghost Company records, missions, and sacrifices. Officer Marcus Winters' role in enforcing these protocols now felt like a betrayal of everything his uniform was meant to represent. The sound of boots approaching drew his attention. Through the cell bars, he saw the 3 young soldiers who had stood with him that morning, now wearing expressions of solemn understanding. They had spent hours listening to Claire's stories, learning what their predecessors had given for their country. "Sir," one of them spoke softly, "we've been authorized to escort you to the memorial ceremony tomorrow. They're adding Ghost Company to the official records. Ms. Redford, she wanted you there." Officer Marcus Winters' eyes burned with unshed tears. "Why would she want that?" "She said something about redemption beginning with witness." Share this video if you believe in second chances. Type Ghost Truth if you think every hero deserves to be remembered. The night deepened, and Officer Marcus Winters sat on his narrow bunk, finally understanding. His badge would never again rest over his heart, but perhaps it belonged in the base museum alongside the newly revealed Ghost Company artifacts. A reminder that true service meant protecting not just rules, but the sacred memories of those who came before. As dawn approached, he heard the distant rumble of Claire's van leaving the base. She had more stories to tell, more bases to visit. Officer Marcus Winters pressed his palm against the cool window, watching the headlights fade into the darkness. In the end, it wasn't about regulations or restricted areas. It was about honor, sacrifice, and the courage to face hard truths. His final report would read differently than any he'd written before. "I, Officer Marcus Winters, hereby testify to the valor of Ghost Company and to my own failure to protect their legacy. May their stories never again be silenced." Drop 2. If this story changed how you think about service and sacrifice. Remember, every hero deserves to be remembered. Ghost Truth.